Dear brothers, what's happening, fellas? Today's topic is one that I have struggled with quite a lot. And this idea that I've wrestled with and come to really fully accept is this. If I am able to make a change, I am thus responsible for making that change. To be capable is to be responsible, which is the title of this episode. As I have thought about and assessed this idea, there's a lot of, dissonance that stepped into my mind. Firstly, that just because I can do something doesn't mean I should. Shouldn't we always be patient? And shouldn't we always look before we cross the road? And shouldn't we always reflect and make necessary adjustments as we move through life? Just because something becomes available for me to do doesn't mean I should do it. And this was kind of a fair critique to me of my initial thought. But it is obviously not complete, and it ends up just being wrong. I am only talking about thinking before I leap in that above example. To do so would in fact make me responsible. Even though I have the ability to do something foolish, I'm being responsible by not taking that first step. So that part of my argument pretty much went out the window. So I kept on with my evaluation of this idea that to be capable is to be responsible. So second, what kind of changes are we talking about? A change to my health, a change to how many books I'm reading, a change to how I treat people, a change in my political stances, a change in my character, a change to what my wife and I do on the weekends. What kind of changes are we talking about that I should be responsible for? And as I kind of evaluated all these different kinds of questions, both physically and mentally, I realized that it didn't really matter. The answer was always yes. Any of those actions you are responsible for. So I came to this conclusion. If I am capable of being a good man, a good husband, a good father, a good friend, I am thus responsible for being one. Period. End of story. Which sounds almost too simple, but it's not. Because then we have to go down this rabbit hole. The next question would be, well, then what am I responsible for? Examples. If I am physically out of shape and am capable of doing something about it, I am responsible for getting my diet, exercise, and medical life put into place. Easy as that. If I'm not providing for my family, yet I am capable of making changes so that I can, I am responsible for finding another job or getting a second job and figuring out how to provide for my family. If I'm not making business decisions or avoiding making them, but I am capable and have ideas to promote good change, then I am responsible for putting those ideas down, presenting them in front of whoever your heads of office are, and acting on them. If I'm not leading my family in their faith and being a leader to them, but I am capable, then I am responsible in part for their struggles. My job is to lead. And if I do not lead, someone else is going to step in and their intentions might not be as good as what they should be. This idea and the clarity of it came to me somewhat quickly and honestly in a pretty resolute fashion. I realized that if I am capable, both physically and mentally, then I am responsible. End of story. Easy as that. To ignore that capability is a dereliction of duty, especially my duty as a man. It is a slap in the face to the gifts I've been given and the blessings that I have. It is purposely avoiding responsibility, which makes you the lowest of the low. I think in part, as I was thinking about this, our ability to feel this way, to feel like we can lack responsibility, comes from the fact that our childhoods were pretty much bereft of having responsibility. We were rendered relatively incapable, be it by our parents or the school system or wherever, because they did all of it for us. Even those of us that learned how to struggle through some minefields through our life, we were never educated on our capabilities, which makes us essentially just wards of the state at that point. Incapable men are easily steered to the direction of the captors that they're surrounded by. A silly fiscal example for all of you that will help you understand this crystal clear. How many of you were taught the tax code in high school? How about how to balance a budget? How about how the S&P 500 works? How about how much national debt we are in? How about how you can accrue some generational wealth? How about literally anything besides basic algebra and geometry and E equals MC squared? Did you learn? You guys get the idea. We were never taught those avenues, and this made us illiterate in some capacity. But as we become adults, we continued to not invest any of our time into learning. If you have a working brain, you are capable of figuring out how the world works. The internet has made that abundantly easier. But even in the light of this great internet and all these resources, I make the argument all the time, the reason so much more learning and more wise people existed before the internet is because day in and day out, they wrestled with hard ideas. Remember, people with absolutely no technology, lasers, drones, schematics, and the like, built some of the greatest world wonders of the world. Most of us aren't even capable of building a set of Legos, let alone coming up with prolific and vast amounts of poetry like Shakespeare, or great books like The Divine Comedy by Dante. And guess what? They didn't have typewriters either. They wrote it all down. So let me get to the aspect of all this which really bothered me. And the struggle against it has allowed me to become a little bit more enlightened. Albeit enlightened might be a bit much. I'm still rather dim. And to say I'm enlightened might be laughable. But maybe it's wizened me up a little bit. We're going to go with that. I found it outrageously, and honestly, I felt no small sense of shame when somebody would ask me a question about a hard topic, and I had absolutely no opinion on it. I had very deep opinions on Boston sports teams, the best places to get buffalo wings in town, the only place to get good New York style pizza in town, and that Game of Thrones was the greatest TV series ever until they screwed it up in the last season because they ran out of ideas or some nonsense, and how Cersei meets her demise still makes me ill. But I won't go down that rabbit hole. But I held some pretty strong opinions on it that I could defend. But when someone asked me what my thoughts were on the US economy, no idea. What about immigration policy? I got nothing. What about, do you want to have kids? Is it important to have kids? I didn't really know. What about the objectivity or subjectivity of morals? I got nothing. What about, is homeschooling your children a good idea? Is violence ever warranted? How about, does God exist or not exist? I would just sit there and push those conversations away. They felt too deep, like the kind of stuff only smart, quote unquote, people would talk about, or boring people who like politics and religion and, professor type crap. I was being willfully ignorant, choosing to ignore the world around me because I didn't want to have to wrestle with hard ideas. The exact ideas, by the way, that allow me to be a good man. And this brings me all the way back to my first point that I believe wholeheartedly now. If I am capable of being a good man, then I am thus responsible for being one. I was shirking that responsibility because I didn't like the idea of dealing with harder questions. Give me the stuff about how the Patriots are the greatest football dynasty of all time. But please don't ask me why the government takes so much of our money in taxes. Understand this, fellas. A capable person can only be ignorant for so long, and from there they have two paths they can take. The first is be like the man that I used to be. Don't ask questions, live in your little bubble, be an expert on useless information, but otherwise very mediocre at best, and let the world dictate to you what they want. Be a slave to society. That is your first choice. The second choice is that you ask stupid questions and you do your research. Remember, To learn, you have to be willing to ask stupid questions. And the wise man only has to ask them once. Wise men accept their ignorance. To call myself wise may be a touch foolhardy, but I started making myself ask simple and what I felt like were stupid questions. How is our government made up? What does Congress and the Senate do? What is the evidence for or against the existence of God? Is homeschooling a better option than going to public school or vice versa? Is our food really healthy, or am I just accepting what the world tells me? The capable man asks questions. He researches and then he acts. He can only be held down by his own ignorance for so long. I'm not saying that all of you need to be Rhodes Scholars in foreign affairs or cardiovascular disease or the exact algorithms to maximize your success in the stock market. But if you are struggling with something physically or in your home life and you have the means to do something about it, you are responsible for those problems. If you are struggling with something mentally or a form of knowledge or from a knowledge perspective, and seeing as all of you listening to this at the very minimum have internet access, you are responsible for that ignorance. Guys, we can no longer allow ourselves to be wards, slaves of the world around us. They will tell us shit that they want us to do, and we just sit there soaking it up like the good little sheep that we are. Enough. If you're capable of changing your body, if you're capable of gaining more knowledge, it is your job. It is your duty to go make those changes. I hold myself and I hold all of you today capable of those changes, not accountable. Accountability is great, but when you are capable and you don't do what you should, the level of shame you get is very hard to live with. I have lived with it, and I still do to this day. But I push forward, and I urge all of you, do the same. Enough with the ignorance. We're not going to allow ourselves or the next generation to learn such foolishness. If you are capable, you are responsible. Let's not forget it. God bless, boys. Be strong. I love you. Let's get after it.